I followed my husband to another city thinking I would catch him in a lie. But what I found instead made me question every single year of my life. Because when that little boy ran into his arms and called him Dad, I realized I was never the only woman in his story. And if you think that was the worst part, you're not ready for what happened next. My name is Natalie Harper, and before I tell you how I uncovered a secret that had been hidden for 7 years, take a second to subscribe to the channel and comment your country below because I want to know where you're watching from. Now, listen carefully, because this didn't start with a big red flag or some obvious betrayal. It started with small things, things I convinced myself were normal. My husband, Daniel Harper, had always traveled a lot for work. At least, that's what he told me. Conferences, client meetings, last-minute trips that would come up out of nowhere. And in the beginning, I believed him without question, because why wouldn't I? We had been married for 8 years. We had built a life together, a routine, a sense of trust that I thought was unbreakable. But about a year ago, something shifted. It wasn't one thing, it was a pattern. His trips became more frequent, his phone became something he guarded like his life depended on it. He started stepping outside to take calls, lowering his voice, ending conversations the second I walked into the room. And every time I asked, he had an answer ready. Always calm, always reasonable. "It's just work, Natalie. You're overthinking." And maybe I was. Maybe I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored the feeling growing in my chest, that quiet, persistent voice telling me something wasn't right. The moment that changed everything happened on a random Tuesday night. He told me he had to leave early the next morning for a 3-day trip to Riverton, a city about 4 hours away. Nothing unusual. He had mentioned clients there before. But that night, as he slept beside me, his phone lit up on the nightstand, and I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear, but the message preview showed just enough to stop my breath. It said, "Are you coming tomorrow? He's been asking about you." I froze, staring at those words, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would wake him up. "He's been asking about you." Who was he? Why would anyone be asking about my husband like that? And why did it feel so personal? I didn't open the message. I didn't confront him. Instead, I did something I never thought I would do, something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. The next morning, after he left, I packed a small bag, got into my car, and decided I was going to follow my husband to Riverton without him ever knowing I was there. The drive to Riverton felt longer than any road I had ever taken, not because of the distance, but because every mile brought me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I kept replaying that message in my mind. He's been asking about you, trying to make sense of it, trying to come up with any explanation that didn't end with my life falling apart. I told myself maybe it was a colleague's child, maybe it was something innocent. But deep down, there was a weight in my chest that refused to lift. When I finally reached the city, I stayed a few cars behind him, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they started to ache. I watched as he drove past the business district, past the hotels he usually claimed to stay in, and into a quiet residential neighborhood, the kind with tree-lined streets and small, cozy houses. My stomach dropped, because this wasn't where business trips happened. This was where people lived, where families built their lives. And then he slowed down, turned into a driveway, and parked in front of a pale blue house with a white porch. I parked further down the street, my heart racing so fast I could barely breathe, and I told myself to just wait, just observe, don't jump to conclusions, don't lose control. But the moment he stepped out of the car, everything inside me started to crack, because he didn't look like a man arriving for work. He looked relaxed, familiar, like he belonged there. And then the front door opened before he even reached it, like someone had been watching for him, waiting. A woman stepped out. She looked around my age, maybe early 30s, her hair tied back casually, wearing a simple sweater like she had just been at home all day. And before I could process anything, she smiled at him in a way that made my chest tighten. Not polite, not formal, but warm, intimate, Like this wasn't the first time she had seen him walk up that path. And then it happened. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, ran out from behind her, laughing, his small arms reaching forward as he shouted something I couldn't hear through the glass, but I didn't need to hear it, because I saw it. I saw my husband kneel down, open his arms, and pull that child into a hug so natural, so practiced, like he had done it 100 times before. And the boy clung to him, burying his face in Daniel's shoulder like that was exactly where he belonged. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I couldn't look away. I watched as the woman stepped closer, placing her hand gently on Daniel's arm, and he didn't pull away. He didn't hesitate. He leaned into it, like this was normal, like this was his life, a life I had never been a part of. And in that moment, something inside me shattered completely. Because this wasn't an affair. This wasn't a mistake. This was something bigger, something deeper, something that had been built over time, years, right under my nose. And as I sat there in my car, hidden just far enough away to remain unseen, I realized the most terrifying part wasn't what I had just witnessed. It was the question that came next. How long had this been going on, and why did it feel like I was the one who didn't belong anymore? I don't remember getting out of the car. I just remember suddenly being closer, standing on the same street as that house, my legs moving before my mind could catch up, because some part of me needed to hear it, needed confirmation that what I had just seen was real and not some nightmare I could wake up from. I walked slowly toward the house, my heart pounding so violently it felt like it might give me away. And just as I reached the edge of the driveway, I heard laughter coming from inside. Soft, comfortable, familiar laughter. The kind we used to have in our home. And something inside me snapped. I stepped onto the porch before I could stop myself and knocked on the door. Not too hard, not too soft. Just enough to make everything freeze on the other side. A few seconds passed, then the door opened, and there he was, Daniel, my husband, staring at me like he had just seen a ghost, his face drained of color, his mouth slightly open, searching for words that didn't exist. And behind him, I saw the woman again, her hand resting on the little boy's shoulder as she looked at me with confusion, and then suspicion, and then something else. Fear. Natalie? Daniel finally said, my name sounding unfamiliar in his mouth, like it belonged to a different life. And I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to find a man I thought I knew, but all I saw was a stranger standing in someone else's home. Are you going to tell me? I asked quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. And he didn't answer. He couldn't, because there was nothing he could say that would undo what I had already seen. The silence stretched between us until the little boy tugged on his sleeve and said it clearly this time, loud enough for the world to hear. Dad, who is she? And that was it. That was the moment everything became undeniable. The word echoed in my ears. Dad. Not uncle, not friend. Dad. And I felt something inside me go completely still, like all the pain, all the anger, all the questions had suddenly frozen into clarity. I looked at the woman, her eyes now locked on Daniel, waiting for him to explain, to choose, to say something that would make sense of this impossible situation. But he just stood there, trapped between two lives that had finally collided. And in that moment, I understood everything. The trips, the secrecy, the distance, the careful way he had divided his time. He hadn't been cheating in the way I imagined. He had been living 2 full lives, 2 homes, 2 families, and I had only ever been half of his truth. I let out a slow breath, feeling an unexpected calm settle over me. Because the confusion was gone now, replaced by something colder, something stronger. You don't have to explain, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And for the first time since I arrived, he looked afraid, not of being caught, but of